I've been playing 14 now for a couple of months, and in that time I've already played 5 different jobs. Now, I like to get up to speed with each class or job very, very quickly, because probably years of experience playing WoW and developing strategies on how I learn new things very quickly. I wanted to apply some of that knowledge and experience into Final Fantasy XIV for new sprouts as a sprout. And I'll be honest, this might even be very helpful for people even at an advanced level, even if you're not a sprout. This still might be a helpful video if you haven't developed those mechanisms already. I will caveat this video by saying everyone learns differently. If you have your own techniques and your own strategy on how you learn things, then roll with that. But this is a video on how to put things into practice very quickly to reduce the time in which it takes to get quite good at these jobs. First things first then, assigning abilities to your action bars. This is the most fundamental step as it sets the tempo for how everything else is then going to follow. You want to try and be consistent across jobs. That's the most important thing, I think, first and foremost. So if you look, for example, at, say, leg sweep, sprint, and feint here on my bar, you can see, and even like true north and stuff like that, you can see as I swap between monk, samurai, dragoon, all of my melee jobs, they all have those abilities in the exact same position. So there's a consistency there. All my defensives are always going to be positioned in certain spots. So like 8 or 9 on my keyboard, Shift B, Shift D, stuff like that. And that's the same thing if I go play WoW. My defensive is on Shift B, Shift D, because there's a consistency there. When I have to use a stun, I don't have to think, oh, well, where is that ability on my bar? I just think, I know where my stun is. It's on Shift R every time. Where's my bloodbath? It's on Shift B every time. B for bloodbath. So I have those little tools developed, and that means that it removes a step in the process of having to send the signal from your brain to your hands, knowing what ability you want to press. I then also try and assort things by frequency of use. Your core ability, your core rotation combo builders are going to be closer to where your resting hand position is. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on your keyboard should be those abilities that you're pressing very regularly. Whereas things like F1 to F4 or whatever, however you want to assign things, the R, T, Y, stuff like that, they're a little bit further away, so you can use things that are probably less commonly used, cooldowns, true north, that sort of thing. I then like to assign things by whether or not they give me a buff or they are in a combo sequence. So for example, with Samurai, I like to try and assign my number 1 ability. The first thing I want to be trying to do is establish my buff. The next thing I want to try and do is establish my haste buff. So that's on number 2. So I have like this sort of consistency of going in a sequence of I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. And that's how I try and do things. When I play Monk, for example, when it lets me swap, I'll tell you about that one. There we go. So when I play Monk, it's a little bit different, but pretty similar. So I have my number 1 ability. So, well, because you have your different forms, right? And I like to use this action section to set that up. I have my Oppo forms, Raptor, Coel, and this is very important. So I sort of, instead of having like buffs and non-buffs, I have different forms. So I go in that sequence, but it's consistent. So I have 1 or Shift 1. Then I have 2, Shift 2, 3 and Shift 3. Then I can go back to 1 and Shift 1 again, right? So I can go in that order of 1 and Shift 1, 2 and Shift 2, 3 and Shift 3. And if you actually look at what each thing does, they're sort of in an order of establishing combat, getting my buff if I need it, going into a form, a positional of do I need to be on flank or do I need to be on rear, right? So that consistency of going across and then back again is there. When I then look at Samurai again, you can see that I have things go in order from establishing my stickers. So I have it set up so I have 1 and Shift 1 is 1 sticker. Then I have 2 and Shift 2 is a second sticker, right? So this is how I'm sort of in my mind being consistent. If you have to go from 1 to then Shift 5 to then 6 to then 2 to Shift 4, like it's so fragmented, you don't sort of have a clear progression. So I like to keep things consistent with the progression, and I also try and account for positionals as well, and try and have like consistently rear flank will be on rear position will be on one button, flank will be on another. So having a consistency like that, I think, is really good. So once I have things comfortably assigned on my action bar, I like to learn the rotation at a low speed and learn the specific combos. This is helpful in FF where you're getting your abilities slowly over time as you're leveling up, unless you boosted, in which case if you boosted, good luck. But because you're learning your abilities slowly over time, you're naturally gonna sort of slowly be exposed to increasingly complex rotations and combos. I try and ignore positionals, and I try and just purely focus on what lights up when, and what is the priority of each thing that's then lighting up. You know, so two or three things might light up at once, and then I try and understand, okay, well, if I press number 4, I have 3 things light up. Why do 3 things light up? What's happening in my rotation to cause that? And that's when you can then start reading your actual ability names and understanding the initial start point of combat and then the natural progression of each combo. For me on Samurai, for example, the most important thing is establishing combat with my Hakakazi, which then gives me the option to branch out into 3 different sticker generating combos. So I try and do my rotation slowly, steadily, just sort of see what lights up, then I'll stop and I'll go, right, let me read these 2 abilities and see why do these 2 things light up at this point, and see what affects that. And that's how I sort of go through. I go at a very slow speed. Using target dummies can be very helpful, or as you're killing things naturally, like out in the wild, that's where you can just start reading abilities very slowly and going through that rhythm of learning things as you unlock them. Then I try and learn very specific combos and positionals at half speed. So this is sort of the more advanced element of the previous step. We're picking up the pace a little bit on how we're doing things. So we've probably been playing now for a good half an hour or so on the job itself. And we're trying to learn, like, right, what's the rhythm of I want to do combo 1, then 2, then 3. So you're sort of connecting the different combos into the, you know, the full complete combo. You also want to start considering things like positionals, but very slowly, because you don't want to get overwhelmed. Then I like to use utility buttons, even when not absolutely necessary, because it builds good muscle memory and gets you thinking. So sometimes the mob will be casting something like a frontal, and it's not going to hurt anyone. The tank's already moved out of it, yada yada. But I just think, I'm going to stun this, A, so I can understand what is stunnable and what isn't, but also it helps me just get into the mindset of something casting, let me stun it. And then you can start to get choosy over whether or not it's worth stunning something. Better to have the instinct there and then pull back than to not have the instinct at all. What that'll also do is that'll just show people that you're a good player, and you'll probably get more commendations, and you'll probably do better in performance when you're doing higher level content. And as you get into high level content, feinting is going to be very important. Your defensives, bloodbath can be very important. And that's where I try and just use things to get a good muscle memory. And then, the next thing I try and do is learn specific combos and positionals at full speed whilst looking at the button. So I'll learn my rotation, I'll go, right, start with 1. Then I want to get my buff. Then I'm either flanking or on the rear. Then I want to do my dragon kick, which is going to improve my boot shine and also give me the option between my twin snakes or my true strike. I already have my buff, so I want a true strike. Then I can do my flank position again. Then I can use my boot shine, right? So I'm looking at my abilities, and I'm just like hard looking at things. I'm looking at my positional, so I'll go and get in position if I need to. And I'm just purely looking at everything that's going on, and I'm trying to incorporate positional. So I'll actively be moving around, even on trash mobs in dungeons. I still think it's really good practice. Really, really good practice actually as well, because a lot of times things are jolting around a lot. I think it's really good practice to start doing the positionals then in dungeons. And it means that then you're learning your rotation and also the positionals at the same time at full speed. This is maybe a few hours of playing the complete rotation at, say, level 50, level 60, level 70, right? But wherever your stopping point is. For most sprouts, it's probably going to be level 50, level 60, etc. Then, this is my last and final point, and this is the most advanced stuff, and I really implore you, don't just get to that previous step and then stop and then go, oh, well, I know my rotation when I'm looking at my abilities, I can just do it that way, and I can just be able to do that forever. Like, no, because then when mechanics start happening on your screen when you get to higher level content, then you're going to be in a pickle. Learn your specific combos and your positionals whilst not looking at your abilities. This is the most important step for committing everything to memory, because it gets you to visualize things, and visualizing them is really important. You visualize them where they're on your keyboard, where you're on the action bars, and you also visualize what you've just pressed, what you're gonna press now, and the follow-up ability that you're gonna press after that. So for example, I'm playing Monk, right? Like, I can press my number 1, which is going to allow me to get my buff from number 2, and then I'm going to want to use my flank position on number 3, which is then going to activate my dragon kick on number 4. Then I'm going to want to use my shift 2, because I already have my buff. Then I'm going to want to, let's say I use my true north there, and I can use shift 3. Then, because I've got my boot, strap, kick, buff, I can use my number 1 again, and then I probably need to apply my buff, so I use my number 2. And then I'll use my number 3, right? And you can do little check-ins and just make sure, oh yeah, I got my butt, oh yeah, that's where I'm supposed to be, okay, cool. And you do those little check-ins, but the core rotation is there. And yes, your cooldowns and stuff, how much chi you're at, and if you maybe, I don't know, need to like charge to a mob or something, you can just double check, oh, do I have a perfect balance available? Oh, cool, okay, let me press that, right? And you can check in with those things. But because those are such long timers, such, 45-second CD, minute-long CD, you don't have to, like, constantly be looking, like, 45, 44, 43, right? So, learning your core rhythm, your core rotation, and the positionals without having to look, you're committing them to memory better, and then just when it gets to hectic gameplay, you can afford to not look at your action bars for a couple seconds whilst you adjust to the mechanic. And then you can go right back into the rhythm of looking at your action bars again if you need to. But that, I think, is the most fundamental, most important step, is not stopping there once you know your rotation. It's committing it to memory and learning the, getting the positionals in there and not having to look at your action bars anymore. And that's where you're going to start to get really good at the game. And then, because you've done the previous steps where you've looked at feinting and using bloodbath when you're low health and stuff like that, second wind, for example, if you're low health, your healers are going to notice, they're going to think you're a good player, your tank's going to notice, they're going to think you're a good player, and other sprouts, they might not notice, but the players that are really going to make the difference and want to group with you again and all that kind of stuff, invite you to a static to come play with them, they're going to notice, and that's the important thing. Hopefully, this video has been helpful for you, and it's at least improved your gameplay a little bit as a sprout. I'm sure there are some things that I could improve on as well, as I'm still very new to the game. But this is without getting too heavy into any of the math of your rotation and without having to execute like the most perfect, optimal rotation. Just getting into a flow of combat. Obviously, I'm still early on in stuff, but maybe I'll do an updated video if anything changes at max level. But this is what I've learned from years of playing World of Warcraft. I play World of Warcraft the exact same way, and it's really made a difference for me. Really improved my gameplay just doing those things. So hopefully this was helpful. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.